Excellent. So, as it's typically said, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you may be. This is a discussion that I've been looking forward to. The question of whether AI is outthinking us, and I think I will argue that it definitely is. But what does this mean? And we wanted to start out with a bit of the evolution, the context of some of the recent developments. And John, what has stood out to you in the last few months when it comes to, some of these surprising breakthroughs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it's not only handling text, it's handling images, can detect what's in an image pretty well. And that's a fairly, I wouldn't say old technology now, but it dates back to probably Geoffrey Hinton in 2012 with ImageNet, where they actually won a competition identifying 95% of the images. But also, generating video. We've seen companies like Suno with, generating songs just from give it the title and it'll do the words, it'll do the music. I mean, this is pretty impressive. The question is where are the boundaries? It's pretty clear that it's just a neural net. Everything's based on statistics of, choosing the next word. So what's you're saying, okay, it's equivalent to the human brain or it's better in some areas. I think that's the question. Definitely some areas it's better, but what I don't think it's there at the moment quite up to the human brain. What about, I'm sure you can argue the opposite, but
So, I tend to think of it, we know sort of the tricks, say that we've done to be able to achieve these gains. And if we think over the last couple of years, right, that we've had of generative AI, and we think about, the ability to be able to create a poem, the ability to be able to create an image, the ability to create a song at a pretty good level, like I'm not an artist and I can create a pretty impressive work of art, and same thing for, music or poetry. But what I've seen in the last, few months takes those tricks, if you would, those techniques that we've come up with, and takes them beyond. And this often happens in software. You see a little thing and you go, oh, that's nothing, and the next thing you know, the world is transforming due to these techniques that we're using. And this past week, there was an experiment done here at the Harvard hospitals where ChatGPT outperform the local doctors. This is the Harvard Medical System doctor, so it's not just any doctor, right? And the score was 90 for ChatGPT, 74 or 76, depending on whether they use ChatGPT or not. And so that's profoundly uh, impactful, right? If I think about things that are really hard for humans to do, diagnose a person. And if I think of, you know, many other examples that have come along in the last few months and surprised me, again, Jeffrey Hinton saying, I'm not a physicist. I dropped out of physics because the math was too hard. And his contribution now to and to computer science that impacted physics, winning him the Nobel Prize. Again, these are things that I did not expect, even though I spend my days looking at this technology and being surprised by it. And so that's where I come in, John. I agree with you that they're tricks, right? But what they're doing surpasses the best of us often in some fields. How do you see it, John?
yeah, I mean, it's clear that it's it's been trained on far more data than any
Yeah,
human.
yeah,
And my sense is that, it's great at big data, that it can rip through lots of data and find patterns in it, and it's certainly done that with language. It certainly writes probably better than most people. I do wonder whether it would match, William Shakespeare, but it can certainly imitate Shakespeare. You can ask it to write in a certain style and it does it pretty well. Um, I'm just looking for like we know with computation that there's certain things that are not computable. So it's
Gotcha.
just those boundaries, I think, where, does it know what it can't do? Um, with humans, I was reviewing what Kahneman said in Fast Think, Slow Think, and one of the things is we're overconfident in our own knowledge, and I think it's Mark Twain's I think it's Mark Twain has said it, that it ain't what you don't know, it's what you know that ain't so that actually hurts you. And that's
It's good.
absolutely right. We're confident that we know that such and such is a problem, or such and such, we need to do that, and sometimes it's just not so. What's your take there? I know, we've read Kahneman, and some Jonathan Haidt comes to mind as well as another guy that looks at what humans can do and how we think.
So I think there's the philosophical, right? It's, what's human, what's machine. But I tend to think about it in the practical. For example, do we need the best mathematicians for most jobs? We don't, right? That's clear. Even if you are in research, right? Assuming your research is not mathematics, right? In many applied fields, you don't need to be, such a high level of mathematician, meaning that the skill set that you find now in these platforms may be enough. And when you think about, the big contributions that I've seen, uh, recently, and some of the use cases, the applied use cases, the one that keeps coming back to me playing over and over is the OpenAI finance team that was having trouble closing their books at the end of the month because they had simply too much data in their spreadsheets, and this was taking them weeks to resolve. And they were able to solve it in 10 seconds with 10 lines of code from OpenAI, right? And they didn't know anything about this field. They're finance people. And again, silly, simple little things that are transformational to many groups as they carry out their work, right? And as we add more of these, for example, physicians in the US are sort of interesting, where those of you who are outside of the world may not be familiar with how doctors operate and, ego and so on. But I would hope that my physician would be advised by ChatGPT, right? That, okay, here's what I think, this is not vanilla case. Somebody that's actually better than they are, could be informed and could be alerted to some blind spot, right? And so, you know I see the philosophical issues, but I'm sort of, pulling back from there, and I'm saying this can do a hell of a lot, even without starting to address that. John?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the fact that it can add up numbers fast, we had the
Yeah,
spreadsheet, and that did
yeah,
make a difference. Uh,
yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at it as a tool, if you like, that can certainly help us. Maybe like the telescope or the microscope, that it'll open new vistas for us. I certainly think it will, up the skill level. So like farmers had tractors, and that certainly helps. And my sense is, yeah, this is going to up our game. The question is it going to replace us? And definitely in some areas, I think, like you're saying, that this machine can interact with humans. I mean, that's its major upside. I think the fact that we can talk to it, we can type to it.
yeah.
Um, it can do pretty decent calculations. You're talking about the latest version, GPT 401, and that certainly is quite impressive. What I find, sometimes it makes mistakes with like orders of magnitude, that it just gets a sign wrong. Now this is, you see the professors looking for the negative sign on the blackboard where something, it should where what it should be, and you've made a mistake. Um, but it is impressive that it can digest things. Now, I think it is limited, and we've talked about this, that this context window is, the fact that it has to handle millions of people making prompts. means that, okay, it can't take too much time. Now with 401, it is taking a lot of time. You know, when you think it's taking maybe a minute and a half of computational time on a pretty big cluster of machines, that's impressive. And like you, I'm using it every day now for scoping out problems. And you know, we both had this discussion about it's not only the detailed things of like adding up numbers, it's great at strategy because it's seen so many proposals, you know, so many business documents. It makes writing a proposal, say for a scientific task, really easy. And yeah, I'm looking though for that weakness of the machine. And you know, it does hallucinate, it does make mistakes, but I think as a co-pilot, it's brilliant at the moment. Now it's going to get better, and the question is, you know, how much better?
So, John, one of the things that was going through my mind as you were speaking is, and others have said it, right? If the past can predict the future, then this is a great tool. And, we don't have to think back that far, to COVID, that all the models broke. However, oh, and we're up on time on the segment, but
Okay, that's good.
but what,
No, I like this.
yeah, yeah,
We're kind of moving on anyway. We've got off the
yeah.
history.
So, but that sort of leads into this next section, right? Which is this human AI collaboration. And that if we think about patterns where this makes sense, it's everywhere where we have data. For example, there was that Stanford experiment where Stanford doctors went head to head with a system that had seen, orders of magnitude more skin cancer than any doctor would have ever seen in their lifetime. And so a human has no chance going up against this, right? Unless, again, there is some new anomaly that doesn't have data for. And so when it comes to human fit and human collaboration, I wonder if that's one of the recipes. Oh, and by the way, Patrick, nice to see you. I saw you there. Comment, Patrick, from Switzerland. Patrick, I haven't seen, we haven't talked in a while, but um, perhaps that's a pattern, John, that, you know, do we have enough data? Are we confident about that data? And then in many scenarios, the machine will actually be better than the human. Is that something that you would agree on, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit a good point though, saying about, you know, it's been trained on data, and you know, a lot of that's just been scraped from the web, and there's a lot of misinformation on the web, that's for sure. So I find that if I'm looking for its opinions, it's giving me what the majority think out there. It's not really, it's not thinking for itself outside the box. You know, I was asking it about how would you organize an AI company? And it comes up with, well, we'll have the CEO, we'll have the CTO. You know, it's going with the structure that it knows about. So it's not coming up, I think, with, now I may be underestimating it. Maybe if I'd prompted it in a different way, it might have been more innovative, or twiddled its temperature. But I do find that it's, and part of this might be the alignment that OpenAI has done. You know, it won't take a strong position. It'll go, well, on the one hand, it's this, on the other hand, it's this. You know, it's kind of just balancing out. So I do worry about that, that I think I can detect, you know, it's like, say, it's political leanings. I'd say, okay, it seems to be taking the, you know, whatever's been out there most in the literature or in the, you know, in social media, whatever it's been trained on. So I think that's its weakness, is that it has been trained on, you know, you could say a lot of data, some of which though is not true, and that might be problematic. What's your take there, Abel?
So, I'm thinking here about human parallels, right? That if the same thing might be true of And I don't want to get into politics here,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, right.
let's
Too
say
early. We should leave
certain
that for the end.
certain nations, so I'm not going to go with regions of the country here, right? Certain nations have different views than other countries, right? They have different systems of governments and different agreements that they've come to. And so if you train based on data that is from a certain geography or a certain group, I mean, if you think about who posts online, right? If you think about Reddit, right? Or who posts on Wikipedia, if you think about that source, these are not representative people, right? I would say they're a very, uh, in the spectrum, they represent one viewpoint, right? Now, when it comes to being able to leverage the data that you need for your LLM, what are you going to use? And so companies, social medias, there's public crawl, right? That scrapes the entire web. And this is one of the sources, unofficially, OpenAI is supposed to use about 60% of that, and then they use some other ones. It's also been reported, though not by the companies, that they're scraping YouTube and many other sources. And so, I can totally see what you say, right? I mean, this is creating a distribution, and there's certain voices that are more represented than others, and so it's going to be there. But you know, given the technology, there's again, I don't want to get into the politics again, but there are people out there in the market that are actually building AI that has no constraints, and it's they're feeding it a different data set, let's put it this way, right? And so I think this is market dynamics in many ways, but when it comes to the actual capabilities, I think given this is from the German professor at Stanford with his students doing that experiment. They fed it medical data in the context of ChatGPT here in Boston. This was case the same type of cases that they present to medical students right here in the Boston teaching medical circle. And so to me, the engine seems to be doing the right things, and it's achieving remarkable results. Although I recognize what you say. It's a bit like Google. People complain about Google. Google is biased, right? If you search for whatever, it's going to filter it in a certain way. John?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using it heavily now for some stuff I'm doing on climate, and it's excellent at being able to make calculations. It pulls in, this is Boltzmann's, energy distribution, whatever, Planck's formula. It can pull that in and it can do the computations, really quickly. And so I do think it's an amazing tool at the moment that everyone should use. Um, Having said that, it will make mistakes, and some of those are due to the way that we're prompting it, or I'm prompting it. That if I'm more specific, I can get it to repair that mistake. And I'm sure you found, like me with coding, it it will code. Uh, Sometimes it doesn't run the code. Sometimes when it runs it, it gets mistakes, and they're usually fairly straightforward mistakes that it can repair. But I'm more concerned, I think, about does it have a fundamental weakness that we need to be aware of, going forward. And it does seem that you read what Ilya is saying about scaling, that it seems that these models do scale, that the bigger the model, the better it gets. Now, one of the things that we as humans are good at is we only have to be shown how to do something once, and we pretty much can pick it up. Humans are very adaptable at one-shot learning. I think this is
Sometimes.
Patrick Winston's famous one shot, and that's pretty good. And I'm not sure it's not bad at one shot learning, actually. You give it an
Yeah.
example, it picks it up pretty well. And
Yeah.
so it's, when I say it's pretty clear that there are lots of it's.
Yeah.
That it's not just where I tend to be focused on OpenAI because I think at the moment they're probably the best, but the other ones are coming up fast and have some advantages, like Gemini. with a million tokens as input, you can do an awful lot with that. So I believe it's an amazing tool. And I think, like I say, I think it's much better at strategy than humans. That telling you what you should be thinking about. It's great at flagging, okay, these are the areas you need, these are the experts you should engage to answer this problem. It's very good at that. And so it's pretty clear to me, and I think to you as well, like you're saying, yeah, this is going to be used all the time. It's going to be like the laptop that already, we're not using Google so much. We had that discussion yesterday about it does seem that Google are actually making their product, searches worse now than it used to be. And, we're pretty much using it every day, all day. I am anyway. And it's just amazing at writing. I was pretty weak at writing. I tend to be a bit blunt, and it smooths out the edges pretty well. Maybe too much.
No, that's one of my findings, that I'm too direct and too blunt, because every every email that I write that I have it checked comes back very different than what I wrote. No, but I wanted to raise here Raphael's point about, having three different tools do a summary of some of his notes and having difference between them. And we're about to hit time on here.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to raise it is because if you think of a parallel, let's say you gave your notes to three humans and you asked it, and I'll just go ahead and move on here to the next topic. You would get something equivalent, right? And I've had the experience of summarizing books now for a number of months, at least for a year. And I've been surprised how well it does it, but it is certainly choosing a certain part of the book to focus in. So for example, if you were to do what's the one by Jeffrey Epstein, Range. So if you were to do
Yeah, range.
Range, it would summarize it into a few areas. And I recently did the book of change Swift, no, the book on change called Shift. And it also, it came back with the writer, it came back with the elephant, it came back with the context, and it's putting it into a certain structure. But if you would have asked me to do it, I would have done it differently, right? And so I think you get different perspectives. And so I wonder here, how advantageous it might be to get different sources for things that are important, right? Not for your everyday, say, summary of a meeting, Otter versus Notion, say, the tools that have this capability at the moment. But how do you think work will change? Jumping into paradigm shift here, John, because of this. Because in many ways, I'm thinking there's many things I shouldn't do anymore, because my time's better spent elsewhere. How about you, John?
No, I absolutely agree with that. I was trying to do some expenses yesterday. I
Yeah,
mean, it's a mess.
yeah,
Um, they've improved it. The workflow is getting a little bit better, but you're
no, it's
dragging and
not.
dropping images into Dropbox, into this and that, and it gets bounced back to you, and you have to make up some reason why you did something. Yeah, it's clear that I think this is an amazing tool that can definitely replace some humans. That's for sure. In the workflow, I think we're going to see very different compositions that, in software, I don't think any software developer now is working totally without it, that it's just too good.
Yeah,
It's too good at giving you that. It's seen a lot of code. I mean, I'm always amazed when I see its code. I go, oh, that's pretty neat. That's a neat way of doing that. It's
yeah,
choosing some of the best ways of expressing things in multiple languages. And I think we forget a little bit that it's not only good at human languages, it's good at computer languages. It's better at some than others because it's seen more code. So Python and JavaScript, it's pretty good. I'm not sure about C++ and Fortran, whether it's how good it is at those, but it's pretty clear that it's changing the way that we're developing software. I mean, what I would flag there that I think software is ahead of a lot of fields.
Mm,
Not all, because I think
mm,
manufacturing has got pretty optimized as well. You know, this mass customization, and I think what we're seeing with this tool, say in education, is we can customize education. That one of the problems we have in teaching is you walk into a class of say 50 people, you're going to guess where the middle is. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to teach to the middle of this group. And there's some people that don't have the background. Now, with an agent, you can develop an agent that's specific to your course, that has knowledge about your course, and that a person that doesn't have the background can say, express this to me in layman's terms, or express this to me as if I don't know a certain language, say, and it can do that. So what I think is we're going to see in education, we're going to see kind of customized courses. It can be customized to you, to what you know now. And I'm sure you've noticed, I know you've noticed, but I don't know if other people have noticed now that in ChatGPT, there's a thing called bio, where it's building up a model of you.
yeah,
So it's got a model of me and all the
yeah.
prompts I've ever done with it, and it's extracted out, some model of what I'm interested in. And that's both good and bad. I think we can talk about the privacy issues, but it's actually pretty good for me as to improve my workflow, in that it knows what I'm interested in. It's got some background on me. It's pulling things out that I'm interested in. And so I do think we're going to enter this age where you're going to have your own kind of LLM, or your whatever you're going to call it, um, generative AI tool that knows a lot about you and actually can improve the way you work, um, you know, significantly. Abel and I are looking at making courses, and we're thinking we used to take 2 months to do about an 8-week course. Now we're thinking like a week. Now we haven't actually completed one in a week because we've got other people involved. But
It's
it's
the humans that are the problem.
exactly, exactly. That's the humans are still the problem. What is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, thinking about paradigm shifts here, and I think there's a number of areas where it's pretty clear that humans shouldn't be doing things. So, for example, there's many departments and many companies who spend a great deal of their time explaining things. You call HR, you call the travel authorization, whoever it is, you call many groups just to figure out how something is going to be done. And so I think, communications and being able to create an assistant that can walk someone through how to use, for example, their brand management, is something that I think many companies, if they're not already, on it, should start right away. Now, right next to that is the revolution that John is bringing up in education. Being able to create content that could even be automated, responding to the market, incorporating those new techniques, being able to create a course in hours, say, as opposed to, it can take a full year to do a full course from scratch. And in that manner, content generation when it comes to marketing, this idea of A/B testing has always been a great one, but how many people really do it? Even if I think of my own software, right? How many A/B tests do I actually do? It tends to be too expensive, right? Too much effort to do it once, much less be able to do 100 of these. When you start to do content generation in an automated fashion, you can actually do this, right? And the other one, the last one that I will mention, is that coding has been something that has had too much friction and too many barriers to be able to adopt. As I mentioned earlier, the finance team at OpenAI was able to run a, few lines of Python to be able to close the books at the end of the month without them being computer scientists or knowing anything about that world. And so the possibility for non-technical people to start to use technical tools, for example, to start to search spaces of data, just using plain language. And you can imagine, right, that you could do this. Say, for example, I have Excel spreadsheets, pull the data from 5 of them and incorporate them around these two, variables, and create me some charts. This is trivial to do, meaning using the interface and the platform. And this is something that, forever has been, okay, I need some support. Typically, it's data engineers. You go in the queue, you have to justify, you have to ask for a budget, and 6 months down the road, you might get it or not, right? And so that ability to be able to explore is something that I think you're starting to see here and there on rare occurrences, but might become widely accessible. John, I see you grinning.
Yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't help but think of pivot tables.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I stayed away from it on purpose.
No, 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 no. But what I was this comes back to a prompt that I asked it. But if you go into any field, you'll find these abstractions. Like a pivot table, and they're quite detailed. And at first, if you're not in that field, you hate them, but then you realize, yes, you do need these terms, that they actually express something, more precisely than if you didn't have that term. So I thought I'd ask GPT what new abstractions it had come up with, because it's seen so much data. I figured that it must have come up with some new abstractions. Anyway, it came up with some interesting ones. It was talking about dynamic abstractions, that it sees the world as being kind of more dynamic than we do. I also asked it, what abstractions that we don't know about as humans. So I'm asking it for new words. It didn't actually come up with any new words, which I think is a sign that, as humans, we have to develop abstractions to master complexity. That, we furniture. We don't say a chair, table, or this or that. We can go, the furniture in the house is X, whatever. So I would expect it, if it can come up with new ideas, and we're kind of saying that's what intelligence is, then it should come up with new language. And I haven't seen that yet. I don't know whether that's a test for intelligence, but certainly as humans, we develop new terms. So I'll throw that out there.
So I've tried to get it to do that, because one of the things I think about a lot is, how do you name things? I used to do this when I used to write a lot more software than I do now, because to me, you know, code is like language, and naming a variable the right name makes it so easy for somebody else to understand your code, whether, and if you name it XYZ, people will hate you with a passion, right? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? And so when it comes to making a presentation, or sharing content, I think about what I call things a lot as well. And so I've tried to get it to, create new words or new concepts, as you say. And it can do it, but I've never been satisfied in the sense that I look at it and I go, yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And so, yeah, I found it limited in that way as well. But as we jump here into this next topic, and think about a future where AI is doing a lot more than it's doing now, I try to envision what that would be. So, for example, in the world of software, as you say, we tend to be a good decade ahead in processes for companies than than mainstream businesses. And they've had the chatbot from the early days, that you're using some code base, some GitHub repository, and you have some questions. And on popular projects, where they have thousands upon thousands of questions and answers, you can go in there and explore the question that you're trying to ask. And it's fantastic as long as you are in that scenario, right? A data rich environment where there's a pretty good community. But if you are on a project where there's 5 users and you're trying to ask questions, then it's trying to interpret the code, and it doesn't do very well, right? And so if you think about this next phase, John, and you think about agents, being able to hand over to more specialized agents, what changes do you see?
Well, I see systems that are going to be exceptionally difficult to test. That we think so. We talk about testing the LLM itself, but you know, if you develop an agent, you've got something sitting in front of the LLM now that can reach out across the world and communicate with 10 other AI systems. And so you're going to see systems like that that are going to be incredibly difficult for anyone to test in the sense that they're highly distributed. Um, so if I'm hitting OpenAI, maybe they've done a great job at aligning their LLM, but I may be hitting that, and I might be then hitting Mistral, sitting in France or in some other cloud, and so I can see that it'll be pretty easy to, if I'm an attacker, to split up the problem into pieces so that no one piece will recognize what I'm doing. And that's the danger, I think, is that we can now build systems. And I'm thinking, one example is blockchain, that you can't take down Bitcoin. You can shut down all the machines in China and it still chugs along quite happily. It's got machines across the world.
At
Um,
98 this morning, by the way.
oh, no. 98,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. That's okay. I I sold all mine long ago and said, "Oh, this is too wild a ride for me." But no, I quite get that. There's a worry in that we can build systems where that we won't be able to necessarily test. I think we can test the components, so we can test the LLM. We can align it so that it doesn't, make statements about politics and whatever. But as a whole, we'll be developing agents and multi-agent systems. I mean, they're already there. We've tested some. So I do think that's the worry, that I don't know how to constrain these. And there's plenty of bad guys that can build these systems now, and Russia and China for sure will be hell bent on building bigger and better. What's
So
your thought, Abel?
as you know, John, I tend to look at it differently. Software has never been perfect, right? This is why we have 0 days until now. Traditional old code, meaning that if you look at a system hard enough, you're gonna find things that it wasn't tested for, and you're gonna find vulnerabilities. And we've had problems. Think of CrowdStrike, right? Uh, you know, pretty much shut down the world for a bit there. And when it comes to AI, traditional AI, we need to understand the risk for sure, as John says, and we need to be able to be comfortable. And the example that I tend to give is that of cameras and roadways, to be able to read license plates. It's not foolproof, right? But it's good enough for what you're trying to use it. And so understand your risk first, number one, and try to address it and see if you're comfortable with that. And when it comes to that next era, right, when we're going to use agents, uh, again, the context depends a lot on what you're trying to do. And a lot of what I've seen in OpenAI has been sharing is that the first hundreds of companies are not doing it at the top-down level where they're going to, you know, deploy something onto the millions and transform what they're doing. They're doing it from bottom up in small cases, like I said, brand management, an experiment in finance. And so that scale is the co-pilot scale. You have a human and the AI working together, and if it doesn't work, that person's going to abandon it, right? And if it works, they're checking on it because this is something that they do, right? And so certainly, risk management, it's a bear of a problem here. But I see the use throughout this last 2 years, with the acknowledgement of the jailbreaks that have existed, right? Or, the image generation and the giving away of airfares and so on. But again, we've done it in other systems as well. We've had the glitches in many places. Even ATMs have given out money for free and so on, right? And so I'm more optimistic about this, but we tend to do that. John.
Yeah, I mean, I think no, I tend to agree with you that good enough is okay. That there's lots of areas that you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be better than the average. And I'm thinking here of going to Vegas. If I've got an
Yeah,
algorithm that is right 51% of the time,
that's
I'm
enough.
going to make a
Yeah,
lot of money. And we both read Jim Simon's book, or the book
right.
on Jim Simon's, the man who cracked the markets,
Beat the
solved the
market.
market,
Yeah, yeah.
solved the
Or
market,
crack.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, the man who
yeah.
solved the
I'll
market.
I'll put it up. Yeah.
Okay, if you can put it up. Yeah, so Jim Simons basically has a company and it's made um, over 30% profit every year. And a lot more in some years with algorithms. And this, I mean, he's a mathematician. He's doing some pretty interesting things. Part of it is that they can invest with lots of transactions, so it's not possible for a competitor to see what they're actually doing. They're doing it at that level that you know they don't want to be understood. Um, so my sense is that good enough, and we're seeing there's some mathematics now called randomized linear algebra that can take very high dimensional spaces and map the vectors in them down to lower dimensional spaces without losing accuracy, or at least you can control the accuracy. You can say, I want everything better than 0.1%. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovation still. I saw some news items saying, "Oh, the pace of innovation is slowing." I don't think so. I mean, it's not easy to come up with something like GPT-5. So I think it's going to take some time, but from what I'm seeing, the pace of innovation is this is the slowest it's ever been. It's going to be faster, and I think you're seeing these alliances between NVIDIA and Databricks and AWS. I think you're going to see a lot of alliances like that where some of these companies come together. That they need the compute horsepower, and I think we're going to see that we need an awful lot more power, in energy sense, that they're buying nuclear power stations. The small nuclear power plants are being sold. So I think that this whole era, we're focusing on Gen AI, but as we were talking yesterday, Abel, cloud computing, that's part of the game. NVIDIA GPUs, that's part of the game. The chips. There's awful lot of pieces here that are coming together. It's kind of the perfect storm, and I know that's
Yeah.
a little trite, but um, I'm optimistic. But in the back of my mind, I have this pessimism as well, that I can see that there could be some bad things happening.
Oh, by the way, Jim just made a comment. Jim, nice to see you. Haven't we also haven't talked in a
Oh,
while.
Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me raise the question here of human purpose, because at some, you could project the future. I think it was Jonathan Haidt actually the other night said that this generation of kids that are growing up now are the last ones that will ever have to do anything themselves, saying that in the future all will be done for everyone and no one will have to do anything. And I actually disagree with that because, as this started to mature, one of the things that happen, as opposed to me losing joy in doing things, is that it actually increased. As John knows, oftentimes when you start on some software project and you get down into the weeds, there's problems that come up that can take you out for a week. And this is a week of, technical people, we love pain and and we love being frustrated and exploring odd and random things and trying to find solutions. But I've found that not having to do that allows me to pursue the initial goal of what I was setting out to do in a much more straightforward fashion. And so that actually gives me a great deal of satisfaction. And I found that in many things, like John says, instead of suffering through a proposal in a whole week, you could do it in half a day. And you don't feel any less joy because of it. And there's many things that we do in life that, there's the I am great document, right? That many companies ask you to do, to rate yourself. Who wants to do that? It's stupid, right? And so you can do that, give me 5 minutes and I'll give you 10, right? And so, that's on the bureaucratic, administrative, crap that everybody has to deal with. And then on the actually, achieving something side, the complexity doesn't go away. Much like, people said, oh, microservices is going to take everything away and it'll be simple, right? And they said that before with object-oriented programming, and they're saying it now with this. And so the complexity is not going to go away. Our challenges are still tremendous. However, we can iterate faster, or I would argue that we can iterate faster, and we can get to what we think are solutions faster, even if they turn out to be the wrong ones and we have to iterate again. John, how do you see that, the end of, complexity, and that everything will be done for us?
No, no, no.
Yeah,
It just shifts around. It's just
yeah,
maybe chaos at a higher level of abstraction. I think that's
yeah, yeah,
the term.
yeah,
No, I think you can already see it now that we thought that APIs were going to solve the problem. Uh, you look out there and it's just a mess. That I mean, one of the things is I think choosing a platform at the moment for this is difficult. That there's no clear winner yet. That things are going to change. You'd probably flag OpenAI and Microsoft. Obviously, are pretty good, but we've coded against GPT. They make they change their API and suddenly all your code breaks. So this is not good news for building enterprise scale systems. I think we're going to see a load of chatbots out there, help desks. I mean, already it's tough to see a human, especially in the Google world. It's tough to get at a human. Even in the Microsoft world, you're going to spend ages talking to machine learning agents. And I think we should say, that there's a lot of machine learning already deployed out
yeah,
there.
yeah,
It's not like we haven't had these machines out there already. It's just that this is a kind of a new interface, if you like, where we can chat with this thing. That it's like a buddy, and that's pretty good. Yeah, Jim Calvert, Jim. We used to hang out together for ages at
yeah,
the beginning of the internet. Yahoo,
yeah,
I remember, and those days. That was great, Jim. Totally agree about cybersecurity.
yeah,
It's so difficult now. You know, we're just buying a little mini Macs so we can just have spare machines that are clean, that that we can go into our bank accounts with.
yeah,
No, it's crazy. It really is crazy that I mean, the digital humans are coming. Abel and I have both got digital humans that our wives are really, scared that they're too good.
yeah, yeah.
You know, even when
Maybe
I'm
they
dead, my
prefer,
digital human will be running around. Um, no, it is interesting that I backed off on the voice because the voice was just too good. I couldn't tell the difference. I didn't know if it was a really me or not. Now, if you've got with the video, it's 10 seconds or so. It looks a bit weird, but I mean, this is the worst it's going to be. It's going to get much better, and already it's good enough to to fool people. I think in short segments,
yeah,
and there's a huge upside to it. Both Abel and I make videos, and if you make, real videos, you're remaking them 10 or 20 times before you get it right. With a digital human doing it, you just feed it the script and it does, the take is pretty much perfect in one or two tries. So Abel, human purpose, what's
So,
what's
so
your take here?
yeah, no. So, I mean, one of the things that's come back to me over time is, human fit. Like you say, for example, trying to do, there's a period of time that goes by before you're actually really good at something. Say, for example, being an actor, right? If you've gone 30, 40 years and, you've internalized it deeply, you can stand on stage and just, wow the world. But most people can't do that, right? It takes a really long time. And like John said, you can train an avatar that can go through this and on average be better than you. And this is surprising, right? But it shows that there's certain things that, the machine can do better. And not only that, it is learning, and time it'll do many more things better. And I was struck by Stacy's comment earlier in the chat that she said that she is learning to prompt by using the prompt, which I thought was a really great comment, right? So, and this is true in general, right? If you want to learn about anything, you can go through this, right? If you're doing competitive analysis, if you're just trying to learn more about certain departments in your company, et cetera, right? And one of the things that struck me about her comment as well is that she said that she's becoming a better communicator because of her evolution and prompting, and I find that myself as well. And one of the things that strikes me of that is that we are taking a role that is typically the leadership role in general. And so when you think about, for example, the development that there are scientists that have now been able to create publications that have been accepted by peer review groups and beaten humans. What does that say about the scientists? It doesn't mean that the scientists are going to go away, but the scientists might work at a higher level of abstraction. And they might decide, okay, I'm going to run hundreds of experiments on this, hundreds of experiments on that. And that used to be the role of the university president or head of department, right? And now you have the end user that has that type of capability. And so I think that's a very different role for most people. And we can jump on, that's probably a good point there to jump on to machine led. Will we be machine led or what will we let machines lead? John?
No, I already think we're so, at the moment we're sitting there prompt as a user prompting the LLM, but it's pretty clear that if you have a very smart LLM, you'll kind of put it at the heart of the thing, and we can already have the LLM call functions that exist, outside. So it'll say, run this function for me. So already we can give the LLM any tool we like. And so and again, that's what I think is the dangerous bit, is once we give the LLM tools to, launch drones, launch missiles, whatever,
Mm.
it's worrying. But on the upside, you can see that it's very good at strategy. It'll figure out workflows. My example is writing a children's book. I asked it, what experts do I need to write a children's book? And it said, okay, you need somebody for plot, you need an expert in character development, an expert on child psychology, a writer, a critic, an editor, an illustrator. And I said, okay, now turn around and play all those roles and iterate between them. And it wrote a book. Now, it wasn't a long book, but it's surprising how good it is at automating, pipelines, if you like, that it can take a task and figure out, okay, this should be done first, this should be done second. And that's what you're seeing now with the 401, is it's doing exactly that. It's iterating around. They've obviously built some, front end there that can re-prompt. So they're taking all that in the background, and using tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of tokens, and then they come up with an answer. Now, again, it's getting better at citing references. RAG systems are pretty good. This is reinforced.
Learning. Yeah.
No, not reinforced learning. RAG.
Oh,
Reinforced
retrieval
retrieval
augment. Yeah.
augmented
Yeah.
generation. Yeah,
Yeah.
retrieval augmented generation. The RAG systems are getting pretty good. I mean, that's a whole field in itself of how to build those systems. It's how do you retrieve the document that's got the answer to your question, or the documents, and it gives the LLM basically access to, petabytes of data, if you like. And so I do think, these systems, the prompt is much longer, or the prompt window is much longer than the window that I have as a human. I'd say if you give me 10,000 words, I'm lost. By the end of reading that book, I'll have forgotten, loads of things about what's going on. So my sense is that it's very different to humans. That certainly we have human purpose, if you like, that we're very collaborative and societal. I mean, I'm saying that and thinking, well, maybe we're not, but it's, I think there's big differences, and maybe we'll come back to, the human brain, because it's, most of it is not dedicated to logic. That, most of the neurons are there in the subconscious doing things that we're not aware of. So, as humans, we really don't have a great deal of grasp on why we're thinking things. That we tend to focus, and then we have this amazing thing where we stop focusing on that and jump to something else. It's unclear that the LLM has got that ability at the moment. Any thoughts on that, Abel?
So let me try and flag here. We have about 5 minutes left or so. A couple of things that have been on my mind. The very first one is a content explosion. There's going to be an avalanche when it comes to scientific publication, when it comes to, publishing of books, when it comes to generating content. I mean, content generating movies. There's a bunch of studios already working on this. And so, what's that going to look like? Perhaps we're already there. There's my TV has thousands of channels, and my streaming service says each of them have tens of thousands of things that I don't even know they have because it's so much. And maybe it won't matter, or maybe it's like Yuval Harari said. When the printing press came along, everybody thought, oh, this is our chance to educate the public, and what everybody wanted to read about was who is a witch, right, and how to tell. And this is the same thing with television, right? Everybody thought it'd be university lectures and going over the waves and airwaves, and what we got was something else. But the second thing, so one is the content explosion. The second one is simulation. There's been a lot of effort to try to model personas. And they're doing this in fashion, they're doing this in focus groups, they're doing this even in medical, right? But as you advance that, the opportunity to be able to simulate and explore, say, organizational makeup, and other such things, it's something that is very costly. So, apparently to be able to create a good focus groups, it takes a few months, and, it's something that requires serious effort. But if now you can do it, you can pay by the seat, and the company is already offering this. Say you want somebody rural from middle America, somebody, from New York, somebody from, some other very different part of the country, and you want to explore how they would react to certain political issues. You can imagine that this is going to start to be done quite a bit. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of exploration that is ahead of us when it comes to these opportunities. And what I look forward to is getting things off of my plate that I know can be automated. And I think many of us can identify those things. For example, I cannot wait for the day that a car picks me up and I can go to sleep in the car. right? That's heaven for me. You know, or that if I want to drive through the countryside, I can just sit there and drink tea and take in the scenery and not have to think about, you know, navigation or driving, right? So to me, that's a great, you know, future of auto, you know, bringing in intelligence um, in places where you know that, you know, your effort is not adding to it. John?
Yeah, my I'll be glad when it's like the GPS system, you know, in your
Yeah,
car where it just says, I think you want to go here this morning. Do you want to go there? Yes. And it shows you the route. You know, how the GPS works, you don't really care. Now, Abel and I have long discussions about like, do you really need to know how the LLM works? And it's
yeah,
like, yes, of course. You know, you need to do the matrices and things. And it's no, it's clear that yeah, we'd love to get to the stage where no code. Um, Unfortunately, I'm always amazed
yeah,
how deep you have to go, you know, with real code. That
yeah,
it'll be something simple, but it's down at several levels below that area, you know, that abstract level that you'd like to work at. You know, it'll be something to do with a DNS or address or something being redirected, you know, in the network. Um, so, you know, we live in hope, but that's my model of the future. As
yeah.
soon as it gets as good as GPS, I'll be happy able.
Yeah. No, no, same here. So that's a great point to end on. And the example that I brought up earlier, you know, about OpenAI being able to close their books at the end of the month using Excel spreadsheets, perhaps one of the most advanced companies on earth, still dealing with Excel.
Excel,
So,
right?
so thank you everyone for turning
Yeah,
up.
thanks very
I
much.
concur with John, you know, on GPS. And so we'll see you on the next one. Reach out if there's topics that you're
Yeah, if there's
interested in,
topics that you want
you
us
know,
to look at.
and we'll see you online. Take care,
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah. Take a look at our GitHub accounts.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Take care.
Cheers, Abel.
Yeah. Let's see.